Good evening, everyone. We'll just wait for a minute. We still have people joining in before we start off the lecture series. And welcome to PM School's Star Lecture Series, where we host, a product leader in the industry from the industry every month to talk about very specific topics to help a product manager's journey. So we'll just wait for. We still have people joining in. We'll just wait for a minute and then we can start off, Ashok.
Absolutely.
In the meantime, just a couple of guidelines. Please drop your questions in the chat. Please make use of the chat window to drop in any question you might have. We will take pauses in between the lecture to address your queries. And we'll also have time towards the end of the lecture to address the rest of the questions you might have. And if you have any specific questions around PM School itself, you can either reach out to me or Yash and Manish, who are from the PM School team. After the lecture, we will send out a mail with all the details regarding the PM School live cohort program. If you're interested to become a product manager or you want to get on to the journey to become a product manager. All right, I think we can get started now. So once again, good evening, everyone. I'm Kushal, co-founder of PM School. We've been running PM School since 2020, where we've helped over 100 people graduate to become either product managers or associate product managers. And we generally, I would say, run a live program, a PM School live program, which is 8 weeks long, where we onboard people from the industry who have limited to no exposure to product management, and then help them get the understanding of the fundamentals of the role of being a product manager, and then help with the, help them get trained for product manager interviews and do resume screenings and help them get placed in the industry as well. So yeah, do check out our page, which is pmschool.io. So with that, let's get started. So today's talk is from Ashok, who is a product leader, a director of product, in fact, at Darwinbox. And today we're going to talk specifically about building SaaS applications, right? SaaS products, which are B2B software as a service products. And with that, Ashok, I'll just hand it over to you. If you could just start off with a brief introduction about yourself, and then we can get the talk started.
Great. Thanks, Kushal, for the intro. Thanks, Manish, Yash, for helping me set this up. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashok. I currently work as the director of product at Darwinbox. Darwinbox is a end-to-end HRMS SaaS product. We're in fact one of the largest HCM end-to-end HCM players currently out there. We compete with SAP, Oracle, and Workday primarily, and it's a product that we sell across multiple geographies. So we work with close to 800 odd enterprises, with the typical enterprise being anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 employees, right? And we manage the entire hire to retire cycle as part of the platform. So if you're working in your company, if there is an application which you log in, for applying for leaves or checking out your pay stubs, etc. That's essentially what HCM is, and that's the space we operate in. Right? Prior to Darwinbox, so I've been with Darwinbox for over 4 years now. Played multiple roles, built a few functions from scratch. But over the last 1.5 years, I've been heading a product for about 40% of the overall product. It's a wide product in terms of functionality and scope of coverage that we have. So we kind of modularize it, and I head the product for a few modules. So prior to Darwinbox, I spent time as a management consultant for about 5 years. Got tired of making PPTs and giving Gyan. So Took my career in the direction of moving towards technology, and Darwinbox was still a small company at that stage, and over the last 4 years we've seen tremendous growth, and with that came a lot of learning personally for me. So today's lecture is not essentially a lecture, but more of just me sharing a few learnings that I've been able to gather across over the last 4 years. Primarily when I've seen Darwinbox, serving only a few customers, 5-6 customers, and now when we serve close to 800 customers. So just some of the learnings and some of the decisions that we made, which kind of led us to embark on this growth journey. So today's talk is more about sharing that journey and what are some of the learnings that I've been able to distill out of it. So with that intro, let me get started. So first of all, I think just taking a step back, I want to maybe talk briefly about what a typical enterprise B2B customer journey looks like, right? And specifically when we talk about B2B versus B2C, essentially in B2B, we're selling technology to an enterprise. And when it comes to enterprise customers, there are very specific things that customers look for as a baseline in any enterprise application. And second, there is pretty much a standard journey that most enterprise B2B companies would be having as far as the overall life cycle of the customer is concerned. Right? So I thought maybe we'll spend a few minutes just to get familiar with that journey to start with, and that can help us set context for some of the learnings we'll talk about. Right? So the enterprise customer journey typically begins with what we call as the discovery and pre-sale stage. So, slightly from B2C context, if you compare with that, it's a far more structured, formal, and a lot more involved process. Depending on the nature of the application, the amount of time taken to buy a product would be anywhere between 2 to 6 months for a large enterprise. So during this phase, there's a lot of discovery and pre-sales that happens. So typically, enterprises roll out RFPs. RFPs essentially call out, it's a listing of all the sort of functionality they expect as part of the platform or product they want to buy. And post that, there is a qualification stage in many large enterprises. They qualify which are the vendors that meet the technical specifications that are there in the RFP. Post that, most companies have something called as a pre-sales or a solutions team. This team works along with the direct sales people in the company to kind of solution for the customer at the sales stage itself. So that is where you do a lot of detailed demos. You kind of try to get the customer comfortable with, hey, this is how the functionality would look like. So just get them more familiar and comfortable on the product that you're trying to sell. Right? Post that, many customers ask for POCs where they want to kind of use that product for a defined period of time for a small set of end users, and kind of get a first-hand experience on how they can go about using the product at a later stage. Also at this stage, a lot of customers ask for reference calls, which means they want to talk to other customers who have already bought this product. So it's very important to have a set of happy clients on your roster, because at any point of time, customers will ask you, hey, give me contacts of a couple of people. In some cases, we've had, for example, in Darwinbox, customers actually visit customers who have already implemented Darwinbox. They go to their office, spend the whole day talking to everybody from the CHRO right up to the actual operations user, just to get a first-hand experience of what are the good and bad about the solution they plan to buy. Right? Post this entire phase is when you enter into the commercials and the deal closure phase. Right? That is when you typically sign a contract, and most enterprise contracts will be longish in nature. So think of lock-in periods between 2 to 3 years. In a few cases, we've also seen contracts where people like to go for a 5-year kind of contract. So the reason B2B customers look for long contracts is because they don't want to disrupt their processes every now and then, right? So you want reasonable predictability in terms of having a system for a defined period of time. So typically you will see contracts having 3 to 5 year kind of timelines as well when it comes to the deal, right? So once the deal closes, that is when the account enters into what you call as an implementation and go live phase. This is again a very structured phase where the sales team that has sold the product kind of hands it over to a different team within the company. And that is where you start working very closely with the customer, because fundamentally in the SaaS product, because it's not something that you customize for the client entirely. So a lot of solutioning would happen at this stage in terms of mapping out the exact processes between what the customer has today and what it will translate to, right, in the product. So we do something called as a process mapping. We do a fit and we try to kind of identify what are the gaps in the solution at that stage. Either we build for those gaps, which means we build features to address the gaps of that individual customer, or we kind of nudge the customer to make some process changes so that we don't really have to build something new. Then there is the usual training and change management, a lot of planning around how to do that go live. And typically where you have platforms like an HRMS, which touches every employee in the company, the go live is usually done in a slightly more big bang kind of fashion, because you want people to adopt it from day one. You want to start and you want to ensure that people start using it as planned, right? So once you have the go live is when you have a very the logical next step, which is the post go live support. So this is regular issue reporting, SLA tracking against the bugs. Then when you do releases, having a process around communicating that release to the customer, having a team which will help the customer navigate those new releases and adopt features that you're releasing over time. So again, you have a separate team engaging for this. So all of these phases have different teams, typically in a B2B product company, who would be working with the customer at various at each of these phases, right? So typically this is the support and customer success team that works at this phase. And the implementation go live is where you work with either a implementation channel partner or you work with somebody internal who is trained in getting implementations done in a project sort of manner. Right? So the last stage is where you kind of take them to a high level of engagement. You engage with senior client stakeholders to ensure that a lot of buy-in is established continuously, because stakeholders keep changing, and then you also start keep demonstrating the value realized out of the platform that they want. Right? All this will lead to opportunities for upselling additional parts of your product or additional products in case you have a multi-product strategy, and kind of increase the contract value that you derive out of an individual account. Right? So this is a typical enterprise B2B customer journey. As you see, it's a long and involved process. So therefore, you need to have people who are able to engage with stakeholders at a senior level and be able to make the most out of an account that you close. Right? So what are some of the expectations, right, that customer buying a B2B product would have? So the first and foremost is, I want my process to fit in the product, right? And companies come with very, very creative ways of designing processes, right? So we have customers, for example, in Darwinbox, who use our lead module, and they come up with very finicky and weird rules. For example, to give an example, we have a concept called as a sandwich leave, right? For example, if you are taking a leave on Friday and you're taking a leave on Monday, then automatically Saturday and Sunday should be counted against your leave balance, right? We have companies who have something called as a half-day leave accrual, which means if you are working on a Sunday and it is also your defined weekly off, then you get half a day off, which has to be availed in the immediate next week, right? So you have very, very specific processes that companies are creative about coming up with, and then they will expect your platform to be able to support it out of the box, right? Similarly, the second major expectation they'll have is, hey, whatever product I'm buying, it should neatly fit into the overall IT ecosystem that I have already placed, right? And a typical enterprise company would work with anywhere between 30 to 100 applications. And this is again a small company, so somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 employee size. They would have anywhere between 30 to 100 applications. And if you look at large enterprises which have multi-country kind of setup, the number goes up almost to 600, 800 sort of a number. So when you actually start implementing a new product, the expectation will always be that you are able to fit neatly into that existing IT ecosystem, which means you need to be prepared for ensuring your product can integrate easily into any existing setup. And these setups can be legacy setups, these setups can be modern setups, which means when I say legacy, for example, the existing applications may not have APIs available. They exist, they may not have, they have very, very defined and very constrained kind of approaches for how to integrate with them, which may not be supported by your architecture. So a lot of considerations around this, kind of decides whether your product is successful during the implementation phase. Right? Then, because people don't want to change systems every now and then, they expect the systems they're buying to be scalable over time. Which means, for example, if they have plans to kind of say ramp up their headcount from say 400 to 5,000, right? Then they would expect the system to work seamlessly over that scale. To give an example, we had White Hat as a client, right? And we onboarded White Hat sometime in December 2019, and they had about 150 employees. And it's a very small sort of a client. And we expected White Hat to be, maximum they'll probably grow year on year. They'll probably add 100, 200 sort of employees. That's the kind of growth we were expecting. And then the pandemic hit, and White Hat took off like anything, and they started hiring at a hyper scale. And between January 2020 to June 2020, the employee headcount shot up from 150 to 7,500. Right? So during that time, what helped them was our product was able to scale to that level, which means you are able to create a lot of policies that can be applied to large populations of people, and the system doesn't break when you scale in terms of usage. Right? Then you have products that will scale, that you would expect to scale over geographies, which means today you're working in one country, but you want to take that product to your operations, which are there across multiple other countries. So you want the product to be able to support multi-geography compliances, privacy laws, a lot of local nuances, all of that. Right? Then you expect the product to have appropriate SLAs, and customers expect that the product should demonstrate the value realized out of buying that, right? Because everything, IT is seen as less of an enabler, more of an investment by many companies, and therefore they expect a return on investment, and they want to be able to demonstrate a rupee value or a dollar value against that value, right? So being able to articulate the value that your platform is going to deliver and the feature that your building is able to deliver is very important in the enterprise context. And finally, bread and butter hygiene, which is ensuring that you're compliant to all the local laws, ensuring security. All of that just comes with the territory. So before I jump into the next part, maybe I'll take a brief pause if there are certain questions on what we spoke so far.
So Ashok, there is one question from Charu, which I've answered, but it will be great to get your view as well. What is the typical drop percentage from the beginning till deal closure, and how do you generally reduce that drop percentage? So we're talking about conversion here.
Got it. So the question is from lead to deal closure, or Is it from qualification stage to deal closure stage?
Maybe we could answer both.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it really depends on the product that you are selling. But for example, in our case, the number in terms of post qualification to date closure, our win rate is usually around 50%, which means we are able to do well because once we've entered the consideration set, we're able to do well against competition. But from lead to conversion, the number is usually very low because a lot of people just shop around. They may not have the authority to buy. They may not have the budgets to buy them at the time they're shopping. So that would be somewhere around 5 to 8%, not more than that. All right. Let me continue. So what does it mean for you, right? Because you have these expectations. There are certain must-haves that any enterprise-focused B2B product should have, right? So the first thing is you should have a very defined process for how you do permission accesses. For example, everything that you have, every feature that you have, ideally in case it merits a separate permission access. So you should start thinking about role-based permission accesses, right? So who can access what is something that every organization decides and reviews from time to time. So ensuring that you have a configurable framework for maintaining role-based accesses is very important. The second thing is having a robust audit trail, which means any changes that are done on the platform by anybody have always need to be logged so that if something goes wrong, you're able to triangulate who changed what and when was the change made. Right? Again, something which is a must-have for any enterprise-focused B2B product. The customers will not even talk to you if you don't have these features. Right? Third thing is having a robust data or reporting layer, because at the end of the day, enterprises implement systems so that data is captured in a structured manner and they're able to make sense of the data that is captured in the system, right? So having a very robust reporting layer with all the relevant filters, aggregations, being able to give those reports on demand, right? So these are capabilities which are must-haves as far as the enterprise product is concerned. Then you have workflows or forms as a capability. This is again a very enterprise-specific use case where you need to be able to trigger certain workflows, capture specific client-specific data on a form of their form. Sorry, the look and feel of a form which they would want to control, and being able to pull again all of this data into reports. Right. So this is a very core capability that you'll see across most B2B enterprise products. Being able to define a workflow, define approval flows, and also being able to capture data using custom forms. Right. And finally, integrations, like I mentioned, because you have to fit into that existing ecosystem, you need to be extremely flexible in terms of being integratable with any other platform. And this is where a lot of implementations also fail. It's a very common pitfall when it comes to implementing enterprise solutions, that because you have all the functionality, but unless you play well with other products, you won't be adopted. And finally, these are base expectations, and essentially, especially if you are trying to build something global, then additional things kick in, which is being able to support multi-language, not just for read kind of use cases, but also being able to enter data in multi-language and store data in multi-language. Right? Being able to handle multiple time zones, currencies, because you'll have users working in multiple time zones. So if you have certain scheduled jobs, etc., that you're running, then they need to be run as per the time zone of individual user preferences, right? And obviously, being able to demonstrate that your tool is compliant to all the local regulations based on paramount importance. So, what does this mean when it comes to making your roadmap as a product manager, right? So when a B2B product manager typically starts looking at, hey, okay, I need to figure out what to build in the next 1 year or so, and usually depending on the maturity of the product, when for example, if you're a small company, you wouldn't have roadmap visibility maybe the next couple of months, right? But if you're a large company, customers expect you to kind of give them visibility on what you're planning to build, maybe 1 to 2 year horizon, because they kind of expect they would want to influence part of your roadmap in case they want certain things built into the platform as a out of the box kind of feature, right? So typically you can look at it from 4 dimensions. One is you have competitor benchmarking, which means you define your competitor peer set for your product and you kind of benchmark against, okay, what is my competition doing? Am I positioning myself well with respect to my competition? Am I doing better? So that's something that you need to constantly monitor, because competitors keep releasing features at the same pace or maybe more compared to you, right? Then you also need to have your own thinking around what is the vision that you have for the product, because there are certain things that would come out of original thinking. People may not be asking for it, but it's you as a product manager might have thought that, okay, this is a feature that can solve a real problem. So that should be part of your roadmap. And then you have customer specific features, right? So these are not necessarily features you would want to build, right? May not enhance your product that much, but out of pressure from the customer, you end up building some of these features, right? Because customer might hold you ransom saying, hey, unless you build this, I'm going to walk out, right? And typically when you are early stage, etc., your bargaining power with respect to saying no to those is very low, right? And finally, you have product debt. Product debt is where you want to erase some of the past sins that you've made in terms of some of the calls that you've taken in terms of design, right? So when we started off, when maybe the first 2-3 years of our journey, this is typically how our roadmap would look like. We had 80% of roadmap dedicated pretty much to customer specific features, because at that stage it's all about survival. You want to be market relevant. You want to make some of your early customers happy, because early customers can influence a lot in terms of being able to sell more in the market. Because if you remember, you need referenceability in the market. So you are pretty much it's very difficult to say no at that stage. So therefore you end up building a lot of customer specific features, right? So it's a tightrope to walk at that stage because sometimes customers make you build features which will just become heavy product debt later on when you actually scale, right? Now when you reach a mature stage, this would typically what your roadmap look like. So you'd have 40% of your or 50% of your roadmap coming from original thinking, because at a mature stage you want to differentiate your product from others in the market. So you don't want to just build for just copy competition or just build for what your customers are asking. You need to index more around what you want to build, being able to come with original thinking around those features, and obviously dedicate some amount of bandwidth to the product debt, because over time you have accumulated a lot of poor design, a lot of poor bad choices you've made while you are designing certain features early on. So you need to allocate some of your roadmap to that, right? So again, these are not hard and fast numbers. It really depends on the business context, where you are as a company. And when I say mature stage, typically you would have reached a phase where there's a large amount of client base that has already adopted your product. So therefore, you're not so much beholden to individual customers, although you still end up building certain customer specific features, because at the end of the day, you still will have certain delta with respect to what some of your customers are expecting, and in few cases they may be valid feature asks as well, because they would have solution in a certain way which you haven't thought of as a product manager. Maybe I'll take a quick break. I see a few questions that are coming. Let me take a pause, look at them.
Sure. So there's one question from Satish, quite a big question actually. Let's say business is already integrated to another HRMS system or any other SaaS product for that matter. How do we get them to convert to use your product? Is it completely based on value of the product, or will not there be resistance from the business end in order to spend on other integration provided they can manage with the current product? So essentially, how do we how do you convince someone to move away from an existing product which is entrenched in the industry in the particular enterprise to you start using your product?
Right, great question, Satish. And it's a very common problem that our sales team faces, right? So you're right. It is very difficult to move an existing customer who is sitting in a logged-in contract with an existing competitor. For example, a lot of our competitors have lock-in periods, right? Which means if you break the contract midway and you choose to go away to another, you end up having to pay a penalty because you are reneging on that agreement, right? So that becomes a deterrent for many companies to just move out. So that is the biggest deterrent rather than the complexity of integration. Integration is also a deterrent, primarily if the other platform has been able to entrench itself into every other system that is out there. For example, that's something we track as a metric as well when at an account level. How many integrations have we as Darwinbox been able to do within the client's ecosystem? For example, the client has 15 systems. Have we been able to integrate with at least 75% of them, right? Because the more number of integrations that you've established, because there is a lot of pain in doing some of these integrations and a lot of time and effort goes into that, people don't want to rock the boat, right? So tomorrow, if say they're unhappy with certain parts of the Darwinbox product, right? They still think about the value that is coming out of the integrations that they've already built on top of Darwinbox. So therefore, then it becomes maybe a negotiation conversation with Darwinbox saying, "Hey, why don't you just build this feature for me, and I'm set." Right? So that's a conversation we have with a lot of our customers who are stuck in contracts. So a couple of things that we do at that stage. One is obviously wait out the contract period in terms of just finding the right timing when to have that new sale conversation or replacement conversation. The second is we also do something of a partial sell, which means, hey, today you bought an HRMS for say the entire workforce. Why don't you just discontinue the the competitor for say out of your 10,000 employees, say let's just discontinue for one department, right, for 500 employees and just try out Darwinbox over there, right? Or you bought my competitor for 10 modules. Why don't you try these extra 2 modules which don't interfere with these 10 modules from Darwinbox, so that it also helps you create buy-in when the larger piece comes up for discussion. So a lot of these conversations happen. So your product needs to be also built in such a way that it can be partially sold, which means customers can buy part of your product and implement it very easily for maybe part of the organization. So that's something that we commonly do. So wherever we don't find an opportunity to do a full replacement, we try to find opportunities for partial replacements. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, Ashok. Yeah, very well.
Thank you. Thanks. So moving on, we spoke about the roadmap, right? And when you're doing the roadmap and when you're going about doing the specs for the features that you're planning to build, right? There are some common decision points you'll come to, right? And these are decision points where there is no right answer. It really depends on the context context of your company. But broadly, what you can think of is, again, a very common decision point, right? Build versus buy for any product manager. Should I build this feature in-house through my engineering team, or should I just buy something that that comes in the market? So typically, one lens you could use here is understanding how critical is that in terms of the actual application that you're developing. For example, in Darwinbox, we have a feature where you can preview documents. Right now, so obviously to preview documents, you need like a preview kind of functionality where the preview pane should be able to render any file extension based documents, which means you should be able to render Word documents. For viewing, you should be able to render PDFs, PPTs, Excel sheets, right? Typically what your Google viewer would support, right? So for example, you can make a decision either to build that entire thing in-house, or you can just say that, hey, let me just buy a viewer which comes with that functionality out of the box, and then let me just integrate that into my product. Right? So, but in few cases, it's not a great decision to buy it out, because in case where it's a functionality that is very commonly used, right? Because you have integrated with a product which will also price based on usage, and if you can't control usage and you can't price your customers for that particular feature, it's a candidate for building. Right? To give an example, we have a functionality within Darwinbox where you can score a resume that has been put into Darwinbox against a job, which means, say you have a job called as product manager, and you add a few CVs into the product manager job. The system will kind of return back to you a percentage match against the CV and the job, right? So that it helps you just prioritize which CV to look at first. Now, this is a functionality where we kind of discussed on whether we should build it in-house or we should buy it out, because there were ready-made such platforms available which would just give you a score, where if you just send them the job description and the resume, it would just give you the score. But the reason we ended up building it was primarily because there is no control that we would have in terms of the number of CVs that are coming into the platform, right? And the number of jobs that a customer is going to create, which means over time our cost in terms of offering this feature will go up exponentially, and there is no control or predictability we would have against it, especially if we have to pay for every API call to the partner. So there would be no control over it, and you can't tell customers, okay, add only 500 CVs. More than that, I'll start charging you. So it's not an easy conversation or to have, and also it's not a model that my competitors are offering. Right? So which means it becomes a candidate for building it in-house, so that I own the entire piece and I don't have to pay someone externally. Right? So the other option could also be essentially taking a cost lens to it. Again, when you are a small company, you may not have the budgets to buy out everything. So therefore, at that phase, even if it's something that you may necessarily not have the expertise to build, you end up building it because there are budget pressures. Right? The second one, and again, a very, very relevant one, is building fast versus building right. And especially if you're a small company, you should not worry about building right. Because one, you do not know the end state of your product when you're a small company, because the end state of your product is heavily influenced by the customers that you are targeting, heavily influenced by the geography that you're currently targeting. So therefore, it can go in any direction. So what becomes more important here is building fast, delivering fast, shipping fast, so that you're able to show value to the customer faster, right? Because typically in B2B space, you would compete against entrenched players in your beginning stages, unless you're creating a new category of its own. But if you're playing in an existing category, then you are going up against competitors who are probably already there and have a whole bunch of features already in their platform. So there, the only way you can demonstrate better value against those is by building fast versus building right. So if you start over there, you shouldn't worry so much about, okay, what is the best way to architecturally design this? What is the best UX for this? You shouldn't worry about that for your MVP or the first few releases of your product. Right? In fact, in our case, we did not worry about, our focus was building fast, at least for the first 3 years. After that, once you have enough pool of customers, that's when you have to start thinking about righting some of those wrongs that you probably made in the speed for building, in the race for building a lot of features. Right. Then a linked one, which is, do I focus on features or do I focus on stability? Right? Because stability, both are important. Features are important because you want to sell more. Stability is important because you obviously want to protect the customers who have already bought your product. Right? Again, here, in your initial phases, index more for features, which means if engineering is coming back and telling you, hey, we need so and so time to refactor this code, or we need to implement certain new libraries for, because this is a better technology, all of that, those should be deprioritized over building new features, right? Because you want acceptability from your customers first, and customers evaluate you on features. They necessarily don't have the data points to evaluate you on stability when it comes at the sales phase, right? So you always index for features in your early stage, but obviously once you've reached a mature stage, very, very important, stability is very important. And at the cost of not building a new feature, you should ensure that your platform is very reliable and very stable, because if it is very buggy, that's the worst kind of feedback you can have in the market. Right? Nobody is even going to look at it after all, if that's a sort of messaging that comes from your existing customers. Right? Tightrope to walk, but if push comes to shove, feature over stability in your early stage. Then again, a very common thing: do I incrementally enhance my existing features, or every time I build a new feature, should I relook at all the existing features and see if I should do like a complete revamp of that entire piece of product? Right? Again, temptation could be to always do revamps, because you'd want to just take a fresh look at everything from scratch. And also revamps become very expensive when your product reaches a mature stage. So early stage of your journey, you can look at doing revamps, primarily because maybe you'd have made some bad choices in terms of the data model to begin with, or you'd have made some bad choices with respect to UX, etc. So until you reach a certain scale, revamp is a good idea. But after a point, you shouldn't rock the boat too much. And again, it comes with certain problems, because people expect you to always meet the latest UX standards and all of that. So, but it's better to meet those via enhancements rather than doing a complete revamp. Because when you do revamps, it involves a lot of change management, and enterprises are typically not so willing to change things every now and then. Right? And finally, that brings us to the last one, which is migrate versus maintain, which is when you end up doing launching like a V2 version of your existing feature. A very important call is, do I migrate everybody from V1 to V2 automatically, or I just bite the bitter pill and maintain both V1 and V2? Right? Really depends on the criticality of that particular functionality that you are revamping or doing the V2 of. If it is a very business critical kind of functionality, it's going to potentially disrupt a core part of your product. Always a good idea to maintain rather than do a summary migration. So always the messaging should be that, hey, we are going to support both V1 and V2, but you can always tell them that there is going to be a sunset timeline for V1. So you should just build options for your customers to migrate themselves, then automatically migrating them from V1 to V2 of a particular feature. That's broadly some of the common decision points you'll have when you're building out features as part of your roadmap. So depending on where you are in your product journey, some of these decisions will tilt one way or another. Then just taking a different lens at it, right? So we spoke so much about enterprise, right? But in B2B, you also have a large business opportunity when it comes to SMBs, right? And typically you'll see products either catering exclusively in the B2B space to SMBs, or you'll see products catering exclusively to enterprises. Very difficult to find products which do both within the same product, because the kind of design considerations and feature considerations you'll have for SMB would vary fairly significantly from enterprise. For example, what is important in an SMB is being able to give self-service options for configurability of your features, right? Which means you will, because you want to reduce your support costs, because SMB is completely a volume game, right? For example, just to make the same revenue of X, say you'll have to sell to one enterprise customer, you might have to sell, if you are an SMB focus, to make revenue X, you'll have to sell to at least 10 or 15 SMBs, right? So which means your support costs will escalate very soon as you scale, right? So therefore, very important to have self-service, being able to help the customer do things themselves, right? Without having to reach out to your support team is very, very important. Second, focusing more on flexibility versus control. So in enterprise, as you've seen, a lot of emphasis is there on audit trails, flexibility, approvals, workflows, a lot of control related elements you would find as part of enterprise. But when it comes to SMB, the focus is more on flexibility because they want to get the system up and running within a couple of days or a week at max, right? So if you start telling them, okay, you need to set up this to enable a functionality, you have to do these 10 different things, right? It's not the best experience in your product. Third one, best in class UX. Now, this is slightly, both ways, because obviously like UX today is like a baseline expectation from any product. So you can't say that, I'll give you poor experience in enterprise. But obviously there are various degrees too in terms of investments you would make in your UX. But so especially in SMBs, you will have to offer a very consumer grade kind of UX compared to maybe you can still go easy on not giving the super best class UX as part of your enterprise product. But for SMBs, you need to have a very, very clean and very good looking UX. Then more around enablement, which is in-app guides, so that people can navigate easily. Ready-made templates for configuration. So if you're a platform where you need to set up a lot of things, just being able to already use one of the ready-made templates that you provided and being able to run with it is very important in the overall SMB context. Then finally, I think metrics that you should be tracking as a product manager, depending on the area or scope you're handling. Revenue by module. Again, revenue can be split as new revenue, which is revenue from your customers that have come in for the first time. Second, renewal revenue, which means after your first contract, after your contract ends, what is the kind of revenue you're getting out of the renewals that are happening. And the upsell revenue, which means after you converted a deal, what are additional things that additional scope that you're able to sell to the existing account. So all these three are something that you need to track because over time, you should see whether your renewal revenue is going up, down, your upsell revenue, are you making enough? So essentially, if you're a large product, which has a lot of features, typically upsell revenue should make up about 30-35% of your overall company revenue, right? And the share of new revenue should ideally be not more than 70-80%. So it should be somewhere in the 50-55% range, right? So that you're not just depending on new sale always, because converting a new account is very difficult, right? But upselling an existing account by making them happy is far easier. And the buying process is far more simpler in case of upsell compared to new sale. Because you're already entrenched, the people there, the pitfalls, all of that. Then most companies run an NPS exercise, very common metric that you track. So typically done once in 6 months in enterprise context. So being able to track NPS for your module, you should know who are your detractors, who are your champions, so that you can drive that metric up over time. Churn rate, revenue, both you should track both revenue churn rate and customer churn rate. What is considered ideal for SaaS is keeping it less than 10%, which means you need to have at least 90% or more renewal rate. So that's a metric that many people track. Most product managers should track for their own module. And finally, having a set of referenceable customers across customer segments, right? Having referenceable customers by industry, by geography, by employee count. So when you have those different sets of referenceable customers, so your new sale becomes far more easier. Right? Broadly, there are a few stakeholders that you should engage as a B2B PM. Internally, it would be your engineering team, your pre-sale sales team, which help you sell the product more, your product marketing, team which will help you communicate your product propositioning to the outside world, and your customer success team which will help ensure that your customer who is using the product is happy. Externally, you should engage very frequently with your customers. You should, so ideally, a B2B PM should talk to at least 15-20 customers in a month, so that they understand firsthand how people are treating the product. And also externally, you engage with analysts, so Gartner, Forrester, IDC. These are common analysts who track the enterprise space, and they publish viewpoints on what platform is good, what platform is bad. They also give you guidance around how our customers, what are certain expectations, new expectations that customers have from products in typical category. So being able to engage with these analysts, taking feedback from them is also a product manager's responsibility. So broadly, in a nutshell, that's I think some of the learnings that I had to share on the overall B2B product management space, primarily in the SaaS context. And happy to take questions at this stage. I think we have a good 5 minutes.
Please keep dropping your questions in the chat. We have a few questions already asked, Ashok. This one is from Teja. How do you decide if a certain functionality needs to be built or not? Basically, at what point do you decide that this is standard or an intended functionality of the product? So essentially, how is prioritization done?
Yeah, got it. So good question. Again, people have, many product managers use multiple frameworks in terms of deciding whether to build or whether to build a functionality or not to build a functionality. So again, it depends on the stage at which your product is. For example, if it's a functionality that is critical for go live of a large customer, right? So you can't, as a product manager, you can't take a stand saying, no, I won't build it, and all of that. So you have to find a creative way. You may not build the exact same functionality that the customer is asking, but you have to find a creative way of being able to support that functionality either through a workaround or through some other fashion, so that you're able to satisfy that customer. But if you're a large company, then it would be a far more rigorous exercise. So you would ask questions typically like, okay, this customer is asking for this feature. How many other such customers also need this feature? So if you look at enterprise products like Salesforce, Workday, companies like that, they typically ask existing customers to vote on features. Right? For example, if there is a feature request from one customer, they put it up for a vote. So depending on the number of votes a particular feature request is receiving, that becomes an input for the product manager whether to prioritize that or not.
Great. There's one more question from Satish. How about configurability in the product while coming up with new features? How vast should the configurations for the new features be? Should we brainstorm and build as many configurations as needed from the get-go, or we build configurations as and when needed? So essentially making the product attractive versus building things with the feedback from the enterprises. So it's a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah. So at least from what experience I have gone through, there should be. I mean, if given a choice, I would. If it is a early stage kind of product, I would not worry so much about building, configurations for every small thing of that feature, right? I would, because at the end of the day, there is also engineering bandwidth to consider. So while the temptation could be that, hey, I want to build it in a very detailed fashion, I want it logically sound, everything, you have to be real and smart about it. So you just have to build configurations for, the base functionality to work, and then not worry about making everything configurable. Don't go into that bad rush of making everything configurable, because configuration also comes at a cost, because then your implementation teams suffer, your support teams suffer if you make it too configurable, because then there's a lot of training that goes with it. There's a lot of learning that your customers and teams have to go through to just be able to use that feature. So that's a healthy balance, but I don't want to stay on the fence on this, but I would build less configuration in the early stages. and really keep it to a minimum and enhance it over time. Then I think we have one question on, when talking about new product for SMB, what is a North Star metric that is to be monitored initially? Honestly, I'm maybe not the best person to comment on this because I haven't really worked on an SMB context. But maybe Kushal, you can take that.
Yeah, I think we can generalize this question. For B2B platforms, generally have a lot of features attracting different set of users within an organization. I mean, even for Darwinbox, you would have different user personas using the same product, right? So in this case, is there any common North Star metric which you can define across the product? Since it is very clear to understand that from a B2C perspective, since the core user actions are generally one or two. So how do we decide is there something like a North Star metric for B2B platforms? If yes, how do we recognize that?
Got it. So North Star metric for B2B platforms is very simple. It's usually the NPS because in B2B, you don't take feedback from individual users. For example, if I'm selling my product, say to Tata Group, right? I wouldn't be, as a B2B product, I wouldn't be too concerned about what is the overall feedback from every Tata employee. What I would be rather concerned is what is the feedback from the power users I have on my platform. For example, power users for me would be the HR team of Tata, right? So I would get my NPS ratings from those users because they are the ones who are essentially the decision makers for me. So the NPS rating that my decision makers are giving me is the North Star metric for B2B at least. And obviously, when it comes to tracking, obviously your revenue growth, etc., are metrics that you track to know whether you are selling better or not. A related metric, not something that we track very often, but also looking at your win ratio. Right? For example, I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that typically once we have entered the consideration set of a customer, the win ratio for us is about 50%. Which means that it's an indication that you are being seen as better in terms of features or any other things with respect to your competition. Which means your product is obviously right there when it comes to competing with others. So win ratio against competition is also something that you can track, but not something you can influence directly because there are other factors which can determine the win ratio. What key considerations or obstacles do you take into account when executing the product for a particular go live? Okay, so I think the biggest problem we have when it comes to go lives is go lives come with a deadline, right? Because customers usually, when they buy the product, they internally the buyer usually set some sort of expectations with their management or their CEO or somebody saying that, hey boss, I'm going to get this product up and running by April 1st, right? But they may not have a very solid idea about what it takes to, if the timeline is realistic. So what it leads to is uncomfortable conversations during the implementation phase saying, hey, I don't know, you have to meet this April 1st deadline. You have to build this feature at any cost, right? So over there, what challenge that it poses to a product manager is one, obviously, appending your existing roadmap. Say, for example, I get a customer today in February end, that customer has a couple of go-live blockers features, and they want those features before April 1st because they want to meet that April 1st go-live deadline. Right? So it means that for me to be able to build those two features, I need to get engineering buy-in. I need to tell them, hey, maybe deprioritize a couple of planned features, introduce these unplanned features over there. I may not have enough time to design it the right way, which means I may just build it so that the bare minimum functionality of what they're expecting is working, and then look at fixing it over time. So these are common challenges you will have when you're building features for go live. So one of the one of the ways to manage that is also trying to put pressure on your implementation teams to kind of reduce the number of go-live blockers for each of their implementations. Right? For example, when we started out as a product, typically, we used to just expect that every client will have a go-live blocker, and we used to just be prepared for just building for every go-live. Right? Now we have put in metrics in place where we tell our client-facing teams, hey, the number of clients for whom you have go-live blockers should come down, which means say 80% of clients should be able to go live without having to build anything new in the product. Right? And then out of the clients who have go-live blockers, the number of go-live blockers should ideally come down over time, because that will kind of put pressure on the customer success teams or the implementation teams to kind of figure out creative ways of repackaging existing features or functionalities to meet the intended functionality that the client has. And that usually works to a large extent. It helped us cut down a lot of go-live blockers. So that obviously speeds up implementations and helps you get your revenue faster. Any other questions?
We're almost towards the end of the talk, folks. If you have any questions, please drop it on the chat box.
Thanks, Raja.
Or you can also unmute yourself and ask if you have any questions. Cool, I think.
All right.
All right, then. Just one. Yes, this recording of this session will be put up on LinkedIn. So don't worry about it. Once again, thanks everyone for joining the session. Thank you, Ashok. It was quite helpful for me, in fact, as well, along with everyone who are participating today. We generally do not have too many talks or resources around B2B, building B2B platforms. So this was a refreshing take on building product for B2B companies. So that said, so we come to the end of today's lecture. Thanks everyone for joining. And once again, we will be putting up the recording on LinkedIn. And second, if you have any questions around the PM School cohort itself, please do reach out to us. We'll send out a mail with all the details after the session, and hope to hear back from you. And please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, to keep yourself updated on such events which happen in the future as well. So with that, I thank Ashok once again. Thanks for joining, Ashok. Thanks for taking the time. And I hope you had as much learning and fun as much as we had.
Sure, man. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks a lot for inviting. Thanks, Manish. Yes, thanks everyone who's taken out time out of your busy day to join this. Look forward to connecting with some of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Bye.
All right. Good night, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.